They thought they had won. They schemed behind my back to erase me from the family's future. But when the truth came out, the final twist shocked everyone. I never thought betrayal would come from the two people I trusted most in this world, my girlfriend and my best friend. For years, I had been the kind of guy who believed in loyalty above all else. To me, loyalty wasn't just a word. It was the foundation of everything I valued. My best friend, Ryan, had been in my life since middle school. We had grown up together, played on the same sports teams, helped each other through family problems, and even shared dreams about our futures. He wasn't just a friend, he was like a brother. And my girlfriend, Emily, was someone I believed I could spend my life with. She was caring, ambitious, and for the past 2 years, I thought she was just as committed to me as I was to her. But looking back, I realized the first cracks started to appear in ways I ignored. Small inconsistencies in their behavior, subtle moments when something didn't feel right, but I brushed it off because I couldn't imagine them ever doing something to hurt me. That's the thing about betrayal. You never see it coming because you don't think the people you love most would even be capable of it. The moment it all started to unravel for me was on a Friday evening. I had gone over to Emily's apartment, planning to surprise her with dinner and a movie night. She had been stressed about work all week, and I thought showing up with her favorite food would brighten her day. But when I got there, I noticed something strange. Her car wasn't outside, yet the lights in her living room were on. At first, I thought maybe she had a friend over, or maybe she had just walked somewhere nearby. But as I approached the window, I saw a movement inside. My heart skipped a beat as I leaned closer. It wasn't just Emily in there. Ryan was there too. They weren't doing anything obviously incriminating at that moment. But the sight of the two of them together, laughing in the living room, immediately set off alarm bells in my head. Ryan hadn't mentioned seeing Emily that day. In fact, he had told me earlier that he was going to spend the evening at home catching up on a new video game. And Emily had told me she'd be working late. I remember standing there, frozen, trying to rationalize what I was seeing. Maybe he had just dropped by to check on her. Maybe she'd invited him over to help fix something. My brain was working overtime to come up with excuses, because the alternative was too painful to accept. But then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. On the coffee table in front of them were 2 glasses of wine, a bottle of her favorite red, and a pizza box half open. It didn't look like a quick visit. It looked like a planned night. In that moment, I felt the first sting of betrayal. My mind was racing, my chest was tight, and I didn't know what to do. Do I confront them right there? Do I walk away and pretend I didn't see it? Or do I wait and gather more evidence before accusing them of the unthinkable? That night was the beginning of everything falling apart. That I left that night without knocking on her door. My hands were shaking too much, and my thoughts were all over the place. Confronting them right then and there would have meant bursting into her apartment with anger, and a part of me still clung to the desperate hope that I was misinterpreting the situation. I told myself I needed to step back, breathe, and think before making accusations that could destroy 2 of the most important relationships in my life. But the image of them together wouldn't leave my mind. Emily's smile, the way Ryan leaned back so casually on her couch as if it were his own place. It replayed in my head like a movie stuck on loop. I kept asking myself, if there was nothing to hide, why hadn't either of them mentioned it to me? Why lie about their plans that night? I barely slept. My phone sat on the nightstand, glowing with their names in my contact list, but I couldn't bring myself to call or text. Every time I considered it, the questions grew heavier. Was I overthinking it? Was this just innocent? Or was this the first sign that the 2 people I trusted most were weaving a secret behind my back? The next morning, I decided I needed answers, but not directly. Not yet. If they were hiding something, I wanted to be sure before I confronted them. So, I started paying closer attention. Ryan was the first test. I casually asked him about his night when we grabbed coffee later that weekend. He stuck to his story about staying home and gaming. He even threw in a little detail about the game, as if to reinforce his lie. My chest tightened at the realization. He was lying straight to my face. Then I checked Emily. When I asked how her late shift had gone, she sighed dramatically and told me about a tough client who had kept her stuck at work. The story was detailed, almost rehearsed, and yet I knew it wasn't true. I had seen her with Ryan. The lies were piling up, and I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down at a truth that would shatter me. But I couldn't jump yet. I needed proof. Solid proof. I started observing small things. Emily's phone, which she used to leave lying around, was now always face down or tucked away. Ryan, who used to call me almost every day, was becoming harder to reach, often giving vague excuses about being busy. And when the three of us were together, something felt off, a tension I couldn't quite describe. They avoided eye contact with each other too much, as if overcompensating. The paranoia was eating me alive, but it wasn't just paranoia anymore. I could feel the shift. I knew something was happening that I just didn't know yet how far it went, or how much it would cost me when the truth came out. The weight of suspicion became unbearable. Every small inconsistency felt like a knife twisting deeper into my gut. I tried to go about my daily life, work, errands, even hanging out with other friends, but my mind was constantly circling back to Emily and Ryan that I kept replaying the lies in my head. Ryan describing his late-night gaming session, Emily venting about her long shift at work. Both of them looked me in the eyes while feeding me stories I knew weren't true. That realization alone made my stomach churn. These weren't strangers lying to me. These were the two people I trusted most, my girlfriend and my best friend. At first, I thought maybe they were just hanging out and didn't want me to know for some reason. But the more I thought about it, the less sense that made. Why would Ryan need to invent a fake gaming night? Why would Emily need to create a fake work crisis? Why would they both work so hard to cover up something innocent? That's when the darker possibilities started sinking in. My brain painted images I didn't want to see. Images of them together behind closed doors, of whispered conversations, of laughter that I wasn't part of. I imagined Ryan sitting where I usually sat on Emily's couch, leaning close, brushing a hand against her arm. I imagined Emily smiling in that way she used to smile at me when we first started dating. The anger came in waves, hot and uncontrollable. But it was always followed by doubt. What if I was wrong? What if I confronted them, accused them of the worst, and ended up being the paranoid fool who destroyed his own relationship and friendship? That fear kept me silent. Instead, I decided to watch more closely. I became hyper-aware of their every move. When Emily said she was too tired to hang out, I checked Ryan's social media to see if he was mysteriously offline too. When Ryan canceled plans last minute, I found myself wondering if Emily was also suddenly busy. And sure enough, the pattern started to emerge. On nights when Ryan bailed on me, Emily often did too. When Emily claimed she was working late, Ryan's phone would suddenly go dark. It wasn't proof, but it was enough to make me feel like I was standing on quicksand, every step I took pulling me deeper into uncertainty. Then came the strangest moment. One evening, Ryan came over, and for the first time in years, he seemed awkward around me. He avoided eye contact, his jokes felt forced, and he kept checking his phone like he was waiting for a message. When Emily's name flashed on the screen, he flipped it face down faster than I'd ever seen him move. That was the moment I knew something was happening. I didn't know exactly what, but the air between us was poisoned. And the worst part? I felt powerless. I was watching the foundations of my life crumble, and yet I couldn't bring myself to act, not without undeniable proof that so. I made myself a promise. The next time I caught even a whiff of them together, I wouldn't just walk away. I would dig deeper. I would uncover the truth, no matter how much it hurt. The very next weekend, my chance arrived. Emily told me she had a late shift again, something about covering for a coworker. Ryan, on the other hand, texted me that he wasn't feeling well and was going to stay home. On the surface, it seemed believable enough. But after weeks of watching their stories unravel, I couldn't just sit there and accept it anymore. That night, I sat in my car with the engine off, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My chest thudded like a drum. I wasn't sure what I was about to do, but I knew if I stayed still, I'd lose my mind. So I drove. Not aimlessly, my gut pulled me toward Emily's place. The closer I got, the more my thoughts raced. Was I crazy? What if she really was at work? What if Ryan really was at home? What if I was sabotaging everything out of paranoia? But as I pulled up to her street, the sight that greeted me shattered every last thread of hope I'd been holding on to. There it was. Ryan's car, parked right outside her apartment. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. I wanted to believe there was some other explanation. Maybe he came to drop something off. Maybe she called him for help. But deep down, I knew. The timing was too perfect, the lies too consistent that I stayed in my car for what felt like an eternity, staring at that vehicle like it was mocking me. My chest burned with betrayal, my hands trembling from the sheer weight of it all. But even then, I didn't storm inside. I couldn't. The thought of walking in and seeing them together, seeing proof with my own eyes, was almost unbearable. Instead, I sat there in the dark, watching the apartment windows like a predator stalking prey. Minutes dragged into hours. Eventually, a light flicked off upstairs. My stomach twisted violently. It was late, far too late for just hanging out. That was the moment something inside me snapped. I realized I couldn't keep living in this limbo, half believing, half denying. I needed the truth. Not guesses, not suspicions. Proof. And I made up my mind right then. The next time they tried to lie to me, I wouldn't let it slide. I would corner them, I would confront them, and I would finally drag the truth out into the open. But I had no idea just how ugly that truth would turn out to be that I didn't sleep that night. The image of Ryan's car outside Emily's apartment kept replaying like a looping nightmare. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling my chest tighten as every memory of the past few months replayed with a new, poisonous clarity. Every little late shift, every vague answer, every flicker of guilt in her eyes that why morning. My exhaustion had curdled into something sharper, a grim, focused determination. I wasn't going to be played anymore. I wasn't going to be the gullible one, sitting quietly while my best friend and my girlfriend treated me like a fool. All day at work, I drifted through my tasks like a ghost. My coworkers' voices felt muffled, distant. I kept going over my options in my head. Barging into Emily's apartment last night would have given me a scene, but no proof. Proof, undeniable, irrefutable proof, was what I needed. So I started planning. I went back through old texts and bank statements, cross-checking her excuses with receipts, work schedules, social media posts. And the more I looked, the clearer the pattern became. She wasn't at work those nights. And Ryan's sick days lined up perfectly with her late shifts. I even remembered a spare key to Emily's apartment that she'd given me months ago in case of emergencies. It sat in the back of my sock drawer, a tiny piece of metal that suddenly felt like a weapon. By Friday, my plan was set. I'd leave work early. I'd drive straight to her apartment. I'd use the spare key if I had to. No more guessing. No more hoping. I would finally know. As I drove that evening, the city blurred around me. Neon lights, wet asphalt, the throb of my own heartbeat loud in my ears. My hands trembled on the wheel. This wasn't how I imagined my life turning out. I parked on the same street again. Ryan's car was there, exactly where it had been before. It was like a sick déjà vu. I sat in the car for a moment, gripping the steering wheel so hard my palms hurt. This was it. This was the night everything broke. Slowly, I stepped out, the cool night air stinging my skin. Every sound felt amplified. The crunch of gravel under my shoes, the distant wail of a siren, the slam of a door somewhere down the block. I walked to her building, climbed the stairs, and stood outside her apartment door. My heart hammered so loudly I thought it would give me away. I took the spare key out of my pocket, and then I hesitated. Because once I turned that key, there was no going back. But in the pit of my stomach, I knew the truth was waiting on the other side. I slid the key into the lock. Click. I pushed the door open, and what I saw inside froze me where I stood. The door creaked open just enough for me to slip inside. The apartment was dim, lit only by the glow of a lamp in the living room. I moved slowly, careful not to make a sound, my breath shallow as though even the air could betray me. First, nothing seemed out of place. Her jacket hung neatly on the hook, shoes by the door, the faint scent of her perfume still lingering in the air. For a second, I almost doubted myself. Maybe I'd built this whole nightmare in my head. Maybe Ryan had just stopped by for some innocent reason. But then I heard it. A soft laugh. A sound I knew as well as my own heartbeat. Her laugh, only lower, more intimate. The kind of laugh she once saved just for me. It came from down the hallway. From the bedroom. I froze, every muscle in my body locking tight. My mind screamed at me to turn back, to leave before the image burned itself into my brain forever. But my legs carried me forward, one heavy step at a time, as though my body had taken control and was dragging me toward the inevitable. The door to the bedroom was cracked open just an inch. Through the gap, I saw shadows moving, two figures too close, too comfortable. I edged closer, my stomach churning, throat tight, and pressed my eye to the sliver of space. There they were. Ryan, sitting casually on the edge of the bed, shirt unbuttoned. Emily beside him, hair tousled, her hand resting on his knee. They looked relaxed, at ease, as though this wasn't some forbidden affair, as though this had been happening for a long time. The sound of my pulse thundered in my ears. My mouth went dry. I wanted to storm in, to scream, to tear the whole scene apart with my bare hands. But I didn't move. Not yet. Instead, I pulled my phone from my pocket, hands shaking so violently I almost dropped it, and hit record. The camera lens caught their movements, their voices, his hand brushing against her arm, her whispering his name. Each second that passed carved another scar into me. But each second also built my proof. When I finally had enough, I backed away slowly, heart pounding, while rising in my throat. I slipped out the front door, closing it gently behind me, and staggered into the night air. The city was alive outside, cars rushing past, people laughing in the distance, and yet I felt completely alone. The video burned in my pocket like a live grenade, proof of the betrayal that had shattered my life in the span of minutes. I stood by my car, staring at the glowing screen, replaying the muffled sounds of their voices until I couldn't take it anymore that I had the truth. But what was I going to do with it? I sat in my car with the engine off, the phone still clutched in my hand. The video replayed again and again until I could barely breathe. Every second I watched, I felt something inside me die, but I couldn't stop. It was like pressing on a bruise, knowing it hurts but not being able to resist. That a part of me wanted to drive straight back to the apartment, throw the door open, and shove the phone in their faces. To scream, to demand answers, to make them see what they'd done. But another part of me whispered that it wouldn't matter. They already knew. This wasn't some accident or misunderstanding. They had chosen this. Together. My thoughts spiraled in every direction at once. Should I confront them in private, demand the truth directly from their lips? Or should I wait, gather more proof, and expose them when it would hurt the most? A wedding, a family dinner, a night out with friends. The idea of them being humiliated the way I felt humiliated almost gave me a twisted sense of relief. Then another thought slithered in. What if I said nothing at all? What if I let them destroy themselves, let the guilt rot them from the inside out, while I quietly moved on? But no, I knew them too well. Guilt wouldn't touch them. If they were capable of betraying me like this, then guilt was a language they didn't speak. That I leaned back in my seat and stared at the dark sky through the windshield. My chest rose and fell in shallow, ragged breaths. I felt powerless and powerful all at once. Powerless because I'd lost the two people who mattered most to me. Powerful because, in my pocket, I carried the truth, undeniable, irrefutable, devastating. Every scenario played out in my mind like a film. Telling my parents, blowing up Ryan's career by exposing him at work, sending the video to Emily's friends, confronting them both in person. Each option carried its own flavor of chaos, and I couldn't decide which tasted less bitter. But one thing was certain. I couldn't pretend I didn't know. And once I acted, nothing would ever be the same again. That night, I couldn't bring myself to go back to the apartment. I parked a few streets away, sat there until my legs went numb, and then finally drove to a cheap motel on the edge of town. The neon sign outside buzzed like a swarm of angry bees, and inside, the air smelled faintly of bleach and cigarette smoke. It felt fitting, like a place for broken people to hide. I lay on the lumpy mattress staring at the ceiling, the glow of my phone screen painting my face in cold blue light. I watched the video again and again. Every replay made my stomach twist tighter, but I couldn't stop myself. Each time I hoped it would somehow look different, that maybe I'd misinterpreted something, that maybe this wasn't what it seemed. But the laughter, the touches, the way they looked at each other, there was no misinterpretation. Sleep didn't come. My mind kept circling back to every moment leading up to this. The subtle glances between Emily and Ryan when they thought I wasn't paying attention. The excuses for why Ryan couldn't hang out. Emily's phone lighting up late at night and her quick, almost panicked swipes to silence it. I had ignored it all, because who wants to believe the people they love most are capable of stabbing them in the back? By 4 a.m., I felt hollow. My body was exhausted, but my mind buzzed like it was wired directly into an electrical outlet. I thought about showing the video to my parents, about how their faces would look. Confusion first, then horror, then pity. Would they pity me for being betrayed, or pity my sister for being caught? I thought about Ryan, about how quickly his smug confidence would evaporate the moment I showed him what I knew. Would he beg? Would he lie? Would he turn it all back on me, claiming I was the jealous, paranoid one? And Emily, my own sister, my blood, how could she look me in the eye and laugh with me at dinner, knowing what she was doing behind my back? The betrayal cut deeper than anything Ryan could have done. I clenched the phone so hard my knuckles ached. The truth sat there, glowing on the screen, demanding to be used. But when? How? In what way that would make them feel even a fraction of the devastation clawing at my chest? Every option felt both satisfying and terrifying. Every choice meant the end of the life I'd known. I realized then, the power wasn't in what they had done. The power was in what I was going to do next, and I had to make them feel it. I sat in the darkness of the motel room until the sky outside bled into pale gray. The city woke up slowly beyond the thin curtain, but inside me everything had gone still and hard. I realized I was at a crossroads. I could explode and wreck everything in a moment of fury, or I could move like ice, calculated, patient, and certain. My anger wanted spectacle. My hurt wanted justice. I decided to try for the latter. The first rule I set for myself was simple: no impulsive exposure. A moment of dramatics would sate the bloodlust, but risked making me look unstable, vindictive, or even false. If people thought I was acting out of jealousy, I would lose credibility, and then the whole truth would be dismissed as the tantrum of a broken man. That terrified me more than their betrayal. I needed this to be airtight. I started to build. I listed everything I already had: the video on my phone, the memory of Ryan's car outside Emily's place, the pattern of lies, the timing of canceled plans. That was a good start, but not enough. I needed context, motives, patterns, proof that this wasn't a single mistake, but an act that had been allowed to continue. I needed to show not just a moment in a bedroom, but the system of deception. That I mapped out scenarios where the evidence would be undeniable and public in ways that wouldn't let them gaslight their way out. Not to humiliate for the sake of humiliation, but to force accountability in front of witnesses who mattered: family, mutual friends, maybe even at a work event where Ryan's reputation could be challenged. I thought about timing. An impulsive late-night reveal would satisfy pain, but a staged exposure at a dinner or gathering would leave no room for convenient excuses. Next came logistics. I made copies of the video and encrypted them in cloud storage under a pseudonym. I wrote notes, dates, small details, times Emily had lied about work, occasions Ryan had canceled. I cross-checked social media posts with timestamps and screenshots. I paid attention to little things most people miss: the pattern of when their phones went silent, messages deleted too quickly, the strange euphemisms they used around each other when I was in the room. Each small inconsistency was a thread. I intended to weave them into a rope, but I didn't want to act like a predator. Part of me still hoped for some sliver of decency, for an explanation that made sense, for a mistake to be confessed and rectified. That hope was a soft, naive thing, but it lived in me stubbornly. Maybe that's why the plan felt ugly, part strategy, part moral test. I knew that when I pulled the trigger, I couldn't unpull it. Lives would change, and not always in ways I could control. I had to be ready for collateral damage. I also prepared for denial. If I confronted them openly, they would scream betrayal. They would twist the narrative: he's controlling, he's paranoid, he fabricated evidence. So I needed witnesses who could corroborate patterns of behavior and an archive of indisputable proof. I reached out, not to tell, but to gather. I messaged a mutual friend under the guise of a casual catch-up and asked about odd nights when Ryan had canceled things. I dug through old photos, saved receipts, traced nights when stories didn't add up. It felt petty and necessary. Finally, I wrote the ending in my head. I imagined the moment: faces going white, apologies falling short, the stunned silence of people realizing they'd been lied to. I practiced the calm voice I would use to present the facts. I rehearsed not in words, but in the cold logic of evidence. If I wanted credibility, I had to be calm, precise, and unyielding. And in the quiet between my plans, a quieter, more frightening thought surfaced. Once the truth was out, would I feel better? Or would the hole inside me stay hollow, a wound with new scars? The answer didn't change the plan. The pain was real. The betrayal had happened. I owed it to myself to stop being the punchline. I waited, sharpened, and patient, like someone holding a match close to tinder. The next move had to be the right one. I chose my first move carefully, test their reactions without revealing my hand. I began by creating opportunities to catch them in small slips, the kind friends might dismiss, but a pattern would make damning sense. I arranged to be in places where their stories would cross. I showed up by chance, where Ryan said he would be alone, and I made sure to be visible when Emily claimed she was working late. I watched their faces, listened to their timing, and cataloged every flinch, every micro-expression that betrayed guilt. When Ryan bragged about an upcoming promotion, I dug into the rumor. If he stood to gain something by keeping me distracted or away, that was motive. When Emily suddenly became defensive about her phone, I asked mutual friends about nights she'd worked late. People are careless with friends' confidences. An ally or two eventually slipped a detail I needed. More importantly, I tested how they covered their tracks. I learned that Emily would leave her laptop logged in if she hurried out, that Ryan liked to sync calendars and then delete events. Small technical traces, easily overlooked, were the gold I needed. I made quiet copies of a few of her social posts, took screenshots of Ryan's offhand comments, and set up a private folder on my cloud where I stored everything. I was methodical because emotion makes sloppy detectives, but the real gamble was emotional. Could I keep my face neutral in front of them? Could I pretend everything was normal while my chest burned? For weeks I did. I smiled, made small talk, attended gatherings. I watched them celebrate trivial victories and kept silence. My restraint felt like a new kind of power. I wasn't the man shaking with rage. I was the man sitting, waiting, collecting. Then I created the opening. I invited a small group to a Sunday lunch at my parents' house, the kind of gathering that always brought both family and mutual friends together. I didn't tell anyone why, only that it would be nice to reconnect. The plan was to be ordinary, cozy, the kind of scene where lies unravel in sunlight. I timed it a few weeks out, enough to let suspicion fade from the surface so they would act naturally and less guarded. In the weeks before the lunch, I met each of the people I trusted most and shared pieces of the puzzle. Not the video. Not yet, but enough to prepare them to notice oddities. Some agreed to pay attention to how Ryan and Emily interacted. Others agreed to let me know if they heard anything. I felt the electric thrill of allies forming around me. On the night before the lunch, I made one last check. I duplicated the video in multiple secure places, labeled the files clearly, and prepared an envelope with a short, factual statement of what I had seen, addressed to my parents and two close friends. I printed copies of timestamps, screenshots, and a simple timeline. I wanted the evidence easily digestible, no drama, only facts. If anything went wrong during the lunch, the packet would be there. As I locked the folder on my laptop, I realized how far I'd come from the man who sat in his car and shook. The plan felt merciless at times, but it also felt like reclaiming agency. I had built a case out of hurt, and I was going to present it with the coldness of proof. When the morning came, I was calm enough that even I had to check my pulse. The house would fill with voices and clinking plates, ordinary sounds that would mask the storm I planned to unleash. I would sit at the table, listen to their laughter, and wait for the exact moment when everyone's attention could be turned to the truth that I didn't know yet how they would react. I only knew that I could no longer live in the half-light of suspicion. The rest of my life depended on what happened in that living room. The living room was bright with the low afternoon sun, casting long shadows across the table that groaned under the weight of food my mother had carefully prepared. The air smelled of roasted chicken, garlic potatoes, and freshly baked bread. Laughter filled the room, the kind of easy, familial noise that usually wrapped me in comfort. But today it felt staged, like a soundtrack masking a truth only I knew. I sat at the far end of the table, watching them all. My parents talked animatedly about neighborhood gossip. My sister leaned toward my mother with exaggerated sweetness, and Ryan charmed everyone with jokes, his arm brushing against my sister's as though it were an accident. The casual intimacy between them was invisible to everyone else, or maybe they just didn't want to see it. Inside me, my heart pounded, but outwardly, I was steady. I poured wine, passed dishes, even smiled. Every gesture was deliberate, a mask I wore while waiting for the right moment. That moment came when my father, with a nostalgic sigh, raised the subject I knew would appear eventually. "We've been thinking a lot about the future," he said. "It's time to start putting things in order, making sure the family home and what we've built will be passed down properly. The table quieted for a beat. I could feel my sister's body stiffen slightly, Ryan's hand tightening on his glass. To anyone else, it was nothing, but to me, it was confirmation. I leaned forward, speaking with a calmness that startled even me. That's actually a good point, Dad. Since we're talking about legacy and honesty, there's something everyone should see. All eyes turned to me. I reached for my phone, already connected to the TV. Within seconds, the screen flickered to life, and the room was filled with the silent, damning video I had taken weeks ago. My sister and Ryan, in her bedroom, caught in a moment they could never explain away. The silence that followed was deafening. Forks clattered against plates, my mother's hand flew to her mouth, and my father's face drained of color. My sister went rigid, her eyes wide with terror, while Ryan stammered and then shut his mouth, realizing no excuse would hold against what they had just seen. I didn't want to do this, I said evenly, my voice cutting through the stillness. But while you've been talking about trust and family, these two have been scheming behind our backs. And not just with betrayal in a bedroom, but with plans to manipulate their way into the inheritance to cut me out entirely. Gasps rippled across the table. My sister finally found her voice, trembling with rage. That's not true. You're twisting everything. But I was ready. I laid the printed timeline, screenshots, and notes on the table, each piece of evidence meticulous and undeniable. My father picked up the papers with shaking hands, scanning the proof while my mother sobbed quietly into a napkin. Ryan stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This is insane. He's obsessed, paranoid. Obsessed enough to find the truth, I interrupted coldly. Paranoid enough to save evidence you couldn't erase. The room erupted, my parents demanding answers, relatives murmuring in shock, my sister's protests collapsing into incoherent sobs. Ryan, red-faced and cornered, could only mutter curses under his breath, and as the storm unfolded around me, I sat back, strangely calm. For the first time in months, the lies were no longer mine to carry. The house, once alive with chatter and the clinking of cutlery, had fallen into a suffocating silence. My parents sat frozen, their eyes darting between me, my sister, and Ryan as if trying to piece together a puzzle they never imagined existed. The smell of roasted chicken now felt nauseating, turning the room into a stage of betrayal and humiliation. Ryan was the first to break. He slammed his glass down on the table, the sound sharp and violent, echoing against the walls. His voice shook, a mixture of fury and desperation, as he tried to frame himself as the victim. This is ridiculous. He's jealous. He's always been jealous. You're going to take his word over mine. But even as the words left his mouth, he knew the evidence on the screen and in my father's trembling hands was undeniable. The confidence that had once oozed from him, the smirk that never seemed to leave his face, all of it had evaporated, leaving only a cornered man grasping at excuses. My sister, on the other hand, collapsed under the weight of the moment. Her voice cracked, desperate, as she turned to our parents. It wasn't like that. It wasn't supposed to go this far. We thought, but she couldn't finish. Every word dug her deeper, confirming guilt more than denying it. My mother wept openly, her shoulders shaking as she whispered that she couldn't believe her daughter would do something so cruel. My father remained silent, but his silence was heavier than any shouting could have been. He looked at my sister as though he was seeing her for the very first time, not as his little girl, but as a stranger capable of cutting her own family apart for money. When Ryan finally realized there was no redemption left in that room, he did the only thing he could. He walked out. No apologies, no explanations, just the sound of the front door slamming shut, leaving a trail of tension behind him. That left my sister, who sat trembling, unable to meet anyone's gaze. For once, her manipulative charm, the one she had used to bend people to her will, had no effect. The mask was gone, and all that remained was the weight of her choices. My father pushed back from the table, standing tall though his face carried years in that single moment. He spoke slowly, deliberately, his voice rough but unshakable. If you thought we could be tricked into turning our backs on our son, you were wrong. We raised this family on trust. You broke it. And Ryan, he's finished here. As for you, we'll talk about consequences when the shock wears off. But don't think there won't be any. His words landed like final judgment, reverberating through the air. My sister buried her face in her hands, sobbing quietly, while my mother sat beside her, torn between comforting her daughter and recoiling from what she had done. That I sat in silence, my chest tight but steady. For months, I had felt powerless, invisible, edged out of my own family. But now, in this fractured silence, the truth stood on my side. That night, as I lay in bed replaying everything, I realized the damage was permanent. The family bond had cracked wide open. My sister's betrayal had been exposed, but in doing so, it had carved scars into all of us. There was no going back to how things used to be. Still, there was a strange peace in finally being seen, and in knowing that, for once, the lies hadn't won. Weeks passed after that dinner, but the tension never left the air. The silence at home was heavier than arguments would have been. My sister barely spoke to me, avoiding my presence like I was the shadow of her guilt. My parents carried themselves with a quiet disappointment that hung over everything we did, as if the betrayal had aged them years overnight. Then came the day of the lawyer's visit. My parents had decided it was time to finalize the will they had been postponing. I dreaded the meeting, half expecting that my sister would find some way to claw her way back into their good graces. When we gathered in the lawyer's office, the polished mahogany table reflected our uneasy faces. The lawyer cleared his throat and opened the folder. My parents sat close, a united front. My sister shifted uncomfortably, trying to mask her nervousness with a calm she didn't feel. The lawyer began to read. My parents had made a decision that stunned everyone in the room, including me. They had decided that their estate would no longer go equally to both children. Instead, it would be placed in a trust under my name, but not for me alone. The trust would allow me to decide, when the time came, how much, if any, would go to my sister.It was a responsibility, not just an inheritance. A message that they trusted me to carry the weight of fairness that my sister had tried to destroy. The look on her face said it all. Shock, humiliation, and then a simmering anger she couldn't hide. She knew she had gambled everything and lost. Her alliance with Ryan had cost her more than she ever expected. Walking out of that office, I felt a strange mixture of victory and sadness. I hadn't asked for this role. I didn't want to be the one holding the keys to her future. But maybe that was the real twist of fate, that the brother she had tried to cut out entirely was now the one who would decide what little she might still have. And as much as I wanted to feel triumphant, the truth weighed on me. Winning didn't feel like revenge. It felt like being handed a crown made of iron. Heavy, cold, and impossible to ignore. For the first time, I realized that justice doesn't always come with joy. Sometimes, it just leaves you with silence. And the power to choose what kind of person you'll be when the dust finally settles. Thank you for watching this story on True Tales Hub. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss our next story. That we post new tales twice a day, and each one comes with unexpected twists you won't see coming.